Hi, it's Dwyer, GamblersAdvisory.com, DwyerSportsBetting.com. For premium picks, look us up in the sports section on Roku, Dwyer Boxing, and Sports News. Remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Well, the weigh-in took place. The weigh-in took place for the rematch, Timothy Bradley against Manny Pacquiao. Both guys came in looking in great shape. Both guys made weight comfortably, weighing in at 145 pounds. Let's just talk about some last thoughts before the fight. Let's turn back the clock. Think about the last time these two guys fought. Just close your eyes for a second and think of the date when that fight took place. Right? Would it surprise you to learn that that fight took place June 9th, 2012? Right? Almost 2 years ago. Now let's say Manny Pacquiao, as I know many of you believe, won that fight. Right? Well, the question is, does that Manny Pacquiao still exist? Is the Manny Pacquiao in April of 2014 the same Manny Pacquiao that existed on June 9th, 2012? Right? Would it surprise you to know that when Manny Pacquiao fought Brandon Rios, he had been out of the ring for 11 months. Right? 11 months for a fighter in his mid-30s who relies on hand speed and coordination. Right? 11 months. Let's talk about the fight that he had right before that. The fight in December of 2012 against Juan Manuel Marquez. Understand, he lost that fight. He got knocked out cold in that fight. He's not dazed and confused. He's unconscious. Right? So, the two fights Manny Pacquiao has had since fighting Timothy Bradley. In one, he gets knocked out cold. Then he's out of the ring for 11 months. Then he beats Brandon Rios, who was visiting the welterweight division. Right? How do we know that the current Manny Pacquiao has the same boxing skills that he did 2 years ago? You saw Timothy Bradley's last fight against Juan Manuel Marquez. You saw how Bradley moved in that fight. Right? When is the last time Manny Pacquiao moved that way against Marquez? Pacquiao looked good in moving against Brandon Rios. But wasn't there a different dynamic against Marquez? A fighter who is a little bit cagier than Brandon Rios. Certainly much better defensively than Brandon Rios. Right? How do we know that Manny Pacquiao, who didn't move that way against Timothy Bradley, is going to move that way now? Folks, I'll tell you, there's a saying in boxing: the legs are the first to go. Right? When you look at Manny Pacquiao, I really wonder whether he's even the same fighter who fought Bradley the first time. You're hearing a lot of political spin in the news. You're hearing stories about whether or not Manny was too compassionate in the later rounds against Timothy Bradley, right? You know, it's couched in terms of compassion, as if it were Manny Pacquiao's decision to let that fight go on. Well, let's think about it a little bit. Let's go back further in Manny Pacquiao's history, the fight before the Bradley fight. That's the Marquez fight in Texas that goes 12 rounds, where the crowd there, at least a portion of the crowd, thought Marquez won the fight. That fight went 12. Okay, maybe Marquez has Pacquiao's number. Perhaps. Did Manny Pacquiao let Marquez off the hook in the later rounds of that fight? Is that why it went 12? Let's go back one fight further. The fight before the third Marquez fight against Shane Mosley. Pacquiao knocks him down early. How did Mosley go the distance? Was it because Manny Pacquiao was compassionate toward Shane Mosley? You know, the problem with the compassion story is the calendar. Manny Pacquiao's in his mid-30s. His game is a speed game, right? It's speed and volume. Pacquiao's not the best defensively, right? You don't look at a Pacquiao match and think, wow, he's a defensive wizard. It's really more of an explosion with him, right? As you watch Pacquiao, you never see fights where Pacquiao's up against the ropes for several rounds dictating action like Floyd was against, let's say, Ricky Hatton or Miguel Cotto, right? Pacquiao at times is up against the ropes, but it's sporadic, it's episodic, right? Pacquiao's typically on his front foot, and he's typically trying to beat you with hand speed. Isn't that exactly the kind of fighter who doesn't age well? Right? Think about it. So now here we are against Timothy Bradley. At the weigh-in, it's an interesting moment. Pacquiao comes out. Pacquiao's an Ali figure. The crowd truly loves him. He's one of the most loved, if not the most loved, boxer in boxing. Right? He comes out, even Michael Buffer looks like he loves Manny Pacquiao. Right? I've never heard Buffer gloss over the fact that one guy's a challenger and the other guy's a champion more than he does at the weigh-in for this fight. Right? Pacquiao walks on the stage, he's a rock star. The crowd is into him. Then Bradley comes out on the stage. Part of the crowd actually starts booing. But understand, this is a focused mission for Bradley, who now knows, who now believes from experience, not conjecture, that he can beat Manny Pacquiao. He feels he did the first time, whatever you and I think. So he comes out, and it's an interesting moment at the weigh-in, because as they're booing, he starts clapping. He's alpha. Right? He starts clapping. He's the guy who feels that no one's giving him a break. So he's not expecting the crowd to cheer for him. He feels that it's him and his trainer and his corner against the world. Right? He feels that he's the better man, and he proved it last time in his mind. Isn't this the worst possible type of personality for Manny Pacquiao to run into at this stage of his career? A guy who's fought him already. A guy who's seen what he can do in the ring. A guy who believes even though he got the decision, he was robbed by the court of public opinion, if that's possible. Right? Understand, the performance Bradley throws down in his last fight against Juan Manuel Marquez, I would argue, given the level of opponent, is better than any performance Manny Pacquiao has thrown down for several fights. Right? Pacquiao's last 5 fights are Brandon Rios, Juan Manuel Marquez, a fight he lost, Timothy Bradley, a fight the judges gave the last 3 rounds of the fight to his opponent on, Juan Manuel Marquez, a fight so controversial that both men agreed to fight again, and Shane Mosley. Right? Manny has a great left hand. In my opinion, it's still a great left hand. But the movement isn't the same. If you look at Manny Pacquiao, and I don't think it has that much to do with compassion. I think it has more to do with Father Time. If you look at young Pacquiao, understand young Pacquiao is really a Mike Tyson type character in terms of the punching power. Most of Pacquiao's early fights ended by knockout. When he first gets together with Freddie Roach, they're knocking everyone out. Right? That's different than current Pacquiao, whose only fight to end inside of the distance in his last 5 fights was the fight in which he got knocked out in the 6th round. Right? The other 4 fights all go the distance. Let me also point out that when you look at young Pacquiao, the movement is dazzling. Right? He's fighting Oscar De La Hoya. Oscar De La Hoya couldn't find Pacquiao in the ring if Oscar had a compass. Right? Pacquiao's moving all over the place. He's elusive. He's hard to find in the ring. When you look at those older films of Pacquiao, you need to ask yourself, if Manny Pacquiao in 2014 fought Manny Pacquiao in 2008, who do you think's going to win? Let me ask a more problematical question. If Manny Pacquiao in 2014 fought Manny Pacquiao in 2012, which Pacquiao would win, in your opinion? If you believe the 2012 version would beat this version, then how do we know Pacquiao's even able to match his performance from the first Bradley fight? Again, Pacquiao, a year has 12 months. Pacquiao was out of the ring for 11 months before he fought Brandon Rios. 11 months. Let's talk about Brandon Rios just for a second. Brandon Rios is a true warrior. I have the utmost respect for how that guy goes for it. But wasn't Rios having problems before Bradley? Let's look at the 2 Mike Alvarado fights. He loses the second fight. That first fight, wasn't that fight up in the air before he stops Alvarado? Wasn't it? That Richard Abril fight. I'm guessing there are many of you right now watching this video who are outraged by the cards in that Abril fight. Outraged. Right? That's the Brandon Rios who Pacquiao beat. Now, let me ask a question. Pacquiao in 2008. Do you feel that Brandon Rios against that Manny Pacquiao would have gone the distance? Right? And so, I believe Bradley looked spectacular against Juan Manuel Marquez. If he comes in with that foot movement, with that kind of speed, I'm wondering what Manny Pacquiao does. You know, the problem too is when you're watching a fight from, let's say, a Mayweather or a Keith Thurman, right? Let me name a bright young star at 147 pounds. And let's not kid ourselves, the torch is being passed to a new generation. Right? I see Manny Pacquiao choosing to fight Brandon Rios, a guest star at 147, and not guys like Keith Thurman. Right? I don't see Manny running to fight Sean Porter or Devin Alexander. Well, the interesting thing with Keith Thurman and with Floyd, both of these guys, is that when you fight them, you know, these guys can come on their front foot. Floyd, first round against Canelo. Think about that. Take a look at that fight. These guys can come at you on their front foot. Or these guys can literally fight you on their back foot. Look at Keith Thurman, big-time puncher, against John Zavik. Now, Manny Pacquiao is an ambush fighter. It's episodic. He's outside, then he comes in, throwing bombs. Then he backs back out. What he doesn't do is beat you on his back foot. Right? That's not who he is. You saw the way he beat Ricky Hatton. Right? He's outside, he comes inside, he's throwing bombs. Right? He's not a guy who's going to linger up on the ropes and lounge there and have you punch yourself out. He's going to try to have more volume than you. Now, aren't you disturbed that 2 years ago, Timothy Bradley actually threw more punches in their first fight than Manny Pacquiao? When are we going to start looking at Manny Pacquiao and realize that, as with every fighter, he's also fighting a fight with Father Time, and that his legs, his movement, might not be what it once was? So I personally believe that 2012 Manny Pacquiao beats 2014 Manny Pacquiao. I believe that even if you think that Manny Pacquiao won the first fight, that's not a guarantee that the same guy is going to show up in the second fight. The interesting thing with the Juan Manuel Marquez knockout of Pacquiao, that fight, is not the punch that ends it. It's the fact that Pacquiao goes down earlier in that fight. Now, I've seen Marquez down early in fights, right? The Juan Diaz fight. But for Manny Pacquiao, it's unusual, right? Pacquiao's usually the one standing up. And it's particularly unusual against Juan Manuel Marquez because, of course, that was the fourth fight they had. And that was the first time Marquez had dropped Manny Pacquiao. That first knockdown. What's going on? I've looked at HBO's advertisements for this upcoming fight, and they just gloss over that Marquez fight. You would think Marquez got lucky with a one-punch knockout. How lucky was he? When by the time the second knockdown came about, he had already knocked down Manny Pacquiao for the first time in their 4 fights. So I see Father Time more than I see a lack of hunger with Manny Pacquiao. Younger Pacquiao could step on the gas and overwhelm. Right? There's no let-up in the Manny Pacquiao who destroyed David Diaz. There is now. Isn't that what happens as fighters age? Right? You look at Bernard Hopkins. Doesn't he take parts of rounds off? Don't guys find ways to pace themselves? Right? Now, fighting at a slower pace works when you have the skills of someone like, I'll name another mid-30s fighter, Vladimir Klitschko. Right? You got a great jab. You're just popping the jab. It's the kind of thing where you can win rounds just popping the jab. Is that Manny Pacquiao? Right? Does Manny Pacquiao have that kind of jab? Freddie Roach actually wanted Manny Pacquiao against Marquez to force Marquez to take the lead at times, right? Because Marquez was setting traps. You know, he had Manny Pacquiao walking into punches. So Roach, of course, wanted Pacquiao to have Marquez be the one walking into punches, not Pacquiao. And you know what? Manny couldn't fight that fight. Forget what people are saying now. Google Freddie Roach's comments about the game plan. Just Freddie Roach after that Marquez fight in Texas. The third fight. Where, he said, hey, I'm not sure what happened. Manny wasn't able to follow the game plan. By the way, back then the excuse wasn't that Manny Pacquiao had lost hunger. Back then the excuse was that Manny Pacquiao's calves were too big. I'm not making this up. Google it. Manny Pacquiao's calves were too big. And that they cramped up, limiting his movement. Right? In the old days, we would just say what I said earlier. The legs are the first to go. He's slowing down. Right? Now, in 2014, obviously, the people financially supporting Pacquiao, the promoters, his team, aren't going to publicly say, hey, the fighter's slowing down. If you're a member of the entourage, the easiest way to lose your job is to go public and say, you know what, the guy who, I'm part of the entourage with, he's slowing down. He's more vulnerable. But use your common sense and use your eyes. Right? Take out the David Diaz film. Take out the Oscar De La Hoya film. Look at that Manny Pacquiao, spectacular fighter. Then ask yourself, Pacquiao today, is he the same fighter? He's going to need to be. At least the 2012 version. If he's going to beat Timothy Bradley. I think what he's going to find is that Bradley moves as well as he does. Bradley has better defense than he does. Right? Bradley can focus and fixate on that left hand all night long. And as I said before, the most troubling thing about Timothy Bradley, straight out of that second round, was his ability to come forward behind a jab on Manny Pacquiao. Right? If Bradley came forward behind a jab on a fighter who knows how to fight and deal with a guy coming forward behind a jab, right? A guy who could fight on his back foot, who could play a cat and mouse game. Let's say Timothy Bradley stuck that jab out like Winky Wright did against Bernard Hopkins, right? A guy like Hopkins would know how to handle it. As you look at the fight, the first fight, ask yourself what adjustments Manny Pacquiao made, right? So, I know the people who follow me here online have been extremely patient with me and have indulged me on this fight. I understand most of you believe Manny Pacquiao won the fight in 2012. Let's put that behind us. The question is, the Manny Pacquiao who shows up tomorrow, is he as good, the 2014 version, as the 2012 version was? Right? Can he give you the same performance? Because he's going to have to lift the ante, isn't he? He can't fight that fight and win here. Right? If he fights that fight again, it's not going to be a clean victory. It's going to be murky. We might again have Timothy Bradley declared the winner and 70 to 80% of the people upset with the result. So he's going to have to boost his game. But wasn't this the same place where he was after the third Marquez fight? Right? By the way, that Bradley fight was the first fight after the third Marquez fight. He couldn't boost his game in that fight. Then he fought Marquez again. He couldn't boost his game in that fourth Marquez fight. I know he had moments, but there are times where he looked less coordinated than he usually looked, right? Resulting in 2 knockdowns, right? The final knockdown, he comes in recklessly, is hit flush, doesn't have a hand up, isn't rolling with the punch. So, I like Bradley and continue to like Bradley in this fight. I think we're going to be surprised. It'll be a new experience to see a guy fight fight Pacquiao, and actually move better than Manny Pacquiao. That's what I'm expecting to happen. I think Pacquiao is going to try to hunt Bradley down. I think Pacquiao at times is going to look like Juan Manuel Marquez did. After the fight, we'll hear what losers always say when someone uses lateral movement to beat them. Right? He ran. Right? He didn't come to fight. As if sticking and moving, bobbing and weaving is a bad thing. As if head movement and lateral movement, knowing when to move to get out of the way of punches, is a bad thing in boxing. Right? Let me just say though, if Pacquiao's game has slipped as much as I think it has, if he starts getting hit with flush shots like he did in the last Marquez fight, understand that Timothy Bradley has a mean streak in him. Right? Don't be surprised if in the later rounds, right, if Pacquiao's left hand, Pacquiao has a puncher's chance. If Pacquiao's left hand doesn't land home, and we're in the 10th or 11th round, and Timothy Bradley is teeing off, right, don't be surprised if Bradley doesn't try to close the show. Right? At that point, it'll be a victory lap for a guy who feels he already earned one. Right? So let me hear from you. The question I have is simply whether Manny Pacquiao is the same Manny Pacquiao we knew in 2008. In fact, it's deeper. Is he the same Manny Pacquiao we knew in 2012? Right? Has he ever moved as well in any of the Marquez fights as Timothy Bradley did when he fought Marquez in his last fight? Sadly for Manny, that's the Bradley he's fighting tomorrow. Let me hear from you. Tell me whether you feel Pacquiao has ever been better. Right? Give me an explanation as to why Pacquiao, a knockout puncher at lighter weights, is no longer getting knockouts. Right? Again, last 5 fights, Brandon Rios goes the distance. Marquez, that fight ends in 6, but not in Pacquiao's favor. Timothy Bradley goes the distance. Juan Manuel Marquez goes the distance. Shane Mosley goes the distance. Those are Pacquiao's last 5 fights. Right? Also, in terms of movement and hand speed, look at the Pacquiao from the Eric Morales rematch. Does that Pacquiao still exist today? Look at the Pacquiao from the Oscar De La Hoya fight. Does he still exist today? We're just hours away from finding out. We're going to find out tomorrow night. Right? In fact, you should find out early in this fight, because hand speed and aggression are the kinds of things that reveal themselves early. Right? Pacquiao dropped Mosley early in their fight. Pacquiao dropped Cotto early in their fight. Right? Pacquiao got Eric Morales to quit in their last fight relatively early in that fight. right? Pacquiao's use of hand speed should reveal itself early. If we get to the 5th and 6th round and Timothy Bradley doesn't look overwhelmed by Pacquiao's hand speed and is landing a jab and actually being the one dictating when they engage in the ring and rolling away from the left hand, if you don't see Pacquiao's left hand landing, this fight is over. Let me hear from you. Thanks for stopping by. I do hope both before and after the fight you leave your comments here in the comment section to this video and hopefully the post-fight video. Thanks for stopping by.